So we're starting a new series. We've been going through Israel and sharing our story there. Hopefully, I had a lot of people say, we want you to keep going. I said, well, I can't go forever, you know. And so we're starting a new series called I Dare You. And these are challenges from the Sermon on the Mount. And there are dare cards back there. There's some on the hall as you go toward the bathrooms. And there's some on the credenza that Alec Royal made for us. Those dare cards, you take one of those if you're willing to accept the dare. Okay, so there's going to be a dare every week associated with some lesson from the Sermon on the Mount. And basically we're saying, I dare you. And today we're talking about I dare you to trust God. And here I'm going to give you a creepy picture according to Mari. And the reason it's there is not so. It was creepy because apparently there's horror flicks out that have this eye thing going on, and I didn't watch that, so I didn't know. But I have a bigger picture, and in the middle of that eyeball is a cross in the reflection, and you'll see that later. But it doesn't matter if it's creepy because it'll get your attention, so you'll see it. But I want you to trust God, and especially in this part in Matthew chapter 6, to trust God with what's in your eye. What's in your eye? What is the focus that's in your eye? And Jesus says a lot about what's going on in the eye in the Sermon on the Mount. But here is the last half of chapter 6 of the Sermon on the Mount. And in this segment, you'll recognize the scriptures because they talk about don't lay up treasure on earth. You know that part? A lot of you familiar with that scripture? Or seek ye first, what? His kingdom and His right. You know these verses, okay? But what I want to tell you is, they sound sort of proverbial in statements like, okay, don't chase after that stuff. You can't serve two masters. Seek first His kingdom and His righteousness. But it seems like it's just these kind of proverbial statements Jesus is tossing out at you. But it's not. They're all tied together by really the heart of what He's getting at. And that is, where's your focus? What are you looking at? Not just with this eyeball, but with your mind's eye. What's consuming your thoughts? And so I'm going to go out of order here. I want to begin with this text right here. This is really, I think, the heart of this segment. The eye is the lamp of the body. And so if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. And I don't know if you can see it. Can you see that picture? It's just like a room that's all dark with a door kind of opening, letting a little light in to let you know there's full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? What this is saying is, it's sort of like, so your mouth, it's your stomach and your body. Your mouth, you consume, food, and that food goes into your stomach, and it becomes your body, right? Your body uses that to make you. Everyone get that? Okay, so your eyeball is like a mouth in that it consumes. Everyone getting this? And what it consumes becomes you, right? And so we think about things like garbage in, garbage out kind of thing, right? These kind of statements about, it's really important what you take in. So if you only ever eat, chips and dip and donuts, I'm covering all of you. Because some of you are chips and dip, like me, and some of you are donuts, like other members of my family. But if you only ever eat that stuff, what happens to your body? Becomes unhealthy, right? You're not giving it the nutrients and the vitamins and the minerals and the things it needs to create strong cellular structures. But it's the same thing with your eyeball. This is what Jesus is getting at. It's the same thing with your eyeball. Where you place your eyeball's focus is going to dramatically affect who you are and what's going on inside your spiritual body. And that's what this whole passage is about. And so if you can get your focus on, here's the weird picture, but now you can see it, right? It's just meaning to show a reflection of the eyeball, right? If your focus is on spiritual things, and you keep your focus on spiritual things, that will be consuming everything in a way that builds up your body correctly in connection with God. That's what we need, but it's not what we do too often. See? Because we're so caught up by focusing on worldly, corruptible things and worrying about those things that we end up, that's what we're consuming. And what happens to our spiritual body? It's not being nourished. See? And so Jesus is trying to change the way we view this stuff. Now I had, so this stuff doesn't look like it went back together right. Just during the service here, as Steve had mentioned, we had all those kids, and I wanted you to see those kids. I inserted a picture, and it crashed the whole thing. It moved all the stuff around in my program, and it never happened before. But anyway, so I have stuff out of place here. My pictures are messed up. So sorry about that. It just happened. But I'll tell you what's going on here. You can see anyway. So do not lay up yourselves treasure on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. You know what the text says, right? Now, I don't know why the picture has moths, because they don't really eat your clothes, is what I've read. Now, I could be wrong, but they lay their larvae, and the larva eats up your clothes. So, but anyway, you know what's happening. Anybody ever have their moth-eaten clothing? I have sort of a... Well, they were skinny jeans when I weighed 25 pounds more just not too long ago. Now they're sort of baggy, skinny jeans. Is that a thing? I don't know. It's not a thing. Anyway, but I really like those pants. But I was wearing them the other day with some friends. And I was trying to show them the yoga poses that I cannot do. But anyway, my friend's wife noticed, she said, just under my pocket, there was a little pea-sized hole in my pants. And they're like, where did it come from? I'll tell you where it came from. Some moth damage ruined my nice pants. And I had a suit one time, a little tiny hole right here, which you wouldn't think was a problem, except the white pocket, you know, this material, the white pocket, showed right through that little tiny hole. Ruined my suit, right? This stuff gets damaged. And rust. Anybody ever lose anything to rust? I have a cast iron pan. I learned really quickly, you cannot let any water, don't let water on that thing. Don't leave water on that thing. If you ever do rinse it off at all, turn the fire on it and get it all really dry. Because almost immediately you can see the rust start to develop, right? It starts to develop and it'll just get covered. This stuff gets destroyed. And thieves break in and steal. Have you ever been robbed or stolen from? My first brand new car was a little Volkswagen Golf, and I put a really nice stereo in it. I wanted to have a nice stereo. I was a youth minister. You had to have something cool, and that was cool. So, but anyway, I didn't have it long, because they busted out my window, somebody did, and took my stereo twice. So I quit putting stereo in my car. But how does that feel? Yeah, you try to have nice things, right? But the moth's going to get it, the rust's going to get it, the thieves are going to get it. If you focus on that stuff, and that's where your heart is, what happens when it's all corrupted? Right? Then your heart's downcast. You're crushed by it. And so Jesus says instead, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth or rust can't destroy, and where thieves cannot break in and steal. This went off track too, but there it is. For where your treasure is, what? See, that's the problem. If all of your whole hope and everything you think about is caught up in stuff that can be stolen, and it gets stolen, what happens to your heart? See? My mom had a Corvair. Anybody know what a Corvair is? Young people don't know what a Corvair is, probably. But anyway, my mom had one, and it was a really cool little car. And but when it stopped working, my dad was always going to get back to it and get it running again. That thing in our side yard was for 50 years turned into a rust bucket. Maybe not 50, maybe 40 years. But it just rusted and rusted and rusted and rusted and rusted until the whole thing just had to be hauled off. I don't know where it went. But it just, if that's where your heart is, you're going to be disappointed. And so Jesus goes into this statement. It's not a different teaching. He's trying to tell us about what we can focus on. He says, you cannot serve two masters. Either you'll hate one and love the other, you'll be devoted to one, or despise the other. And when it talks about hating and loving, it doesn't really mean you hate somebody. And if you understand, we've talked about this before, like when Jesus said, unless a man hates his father and mother, right? And he cannot be my disciple. Does he really want you to hate your mom and dad? Of course not. You have to understand the idiomatic usage of this idea. You're choosing one over the other, and that's what he's saying. You cannot be devoted to two. And what you can do is, if you put your fingers together really closely, you can seemingly focus on both, but put them over here. And if you focus on one, you still can see the other. Try it. Put your fingers out here and focus on one. You might have peripheral vision and be able to see the other, but you're not focusing on it. You understand? You cannot focus in two places. And so we're going to have to trust God with where we put our focus. Are we going to put it on corruptible stuff that's going to let us down? It's going to rust or get moth-eaten or be stolen or whatever it is? Or are we going to put our focus on the things of God? There's my little graphics again. He gives an example. You cannot serve God and money. You can't serve God and money, okay? And here's an example. If your whole goal in life is to have more money than somebody else, and there's some tight race going on because you don't have enough zeros after your bank account name, right? If that's your whole purpose in life, then how are you going to be generous? Even if you do give something, it's probably going to be grudgingly because it's stopping you from accomplishing your goal of getting more zeros on the other side of your numbers, right? Does that make sense? You cannot be devoted to the things of God and devoted to acquiring of money or whatever it is, whatever corruptible stuff. And so we have to keep God in focus. We have to we have to trust God with what we're going to consume with our eyes. And so then Jesus says, I tell you, therefore, now the therefore is there for a reason. It's there to say, this is still talking about that. And so he just told us, don't focus on, stuff. Don't focus on corruptible stuff. And we're going to say, yeah, but if I got to focus on that because how am I going to eat? How am I going to have something to drink? How am I going to have something to wear if I don't focus on that stuff? And he's answering that. He's saying, listen, don't be anxious about that. Don't be anxious about what you're going to eat. He's not saying don't work for your food. He's saying don't be anxious about what you're going to eat. Don't be anxious about what you're going to drink or what you put on your body. Isn't life more than food? Isn't the body more than clothing? Now that's a good question. Are you guys familiar with this? Anybody who took Psych 101, right? If you went to college, they made you take Psych 101. So here's Abraham Maslow's chart, and I think at least some people read this as basically, and this sort of agrees, life is more than eating and drinking and clothing. It does agree with that. But it also sort of says it's only more if those things are taken care of first. That's the way some people read it. So you're not really going to have much time for esteem and self-actualization while you're fighting the bear to get some food, some berries or something, you see. You just don't have time for all that. You've got to work out this sort of lower level foundational stuff first. And so in this chart, even if life is more than food and drink, until food and drink is met, it's really about food and drink and where you're going to sleep or other physiological needs. It's all about that. And so I think Jesus wants us to rethink this chart, okay? He says, look at the birds. Now, what do you look at the birds with? Your eyeballs. But not only with your eyeballs, because it says, look at them, they're not sowing and reaping and gathering the barns. Now, my pictures show you, yeah, he went out and caught the fish, and that bird went out and pulled that worm out. Yeah, but they don't have the bank of worms. Well, I guess there is one of those probably somewhere. But they don't have, this storage facility where the eagles piled up a bunch of fish in there waiting for the next day, right? He's saying, look at them. Well, he doesn't want you to look at them. He wants you to learn from them, doesn't he? Why are you looking at the bird? Because he wants you to see that they're not stressing about tomorrow. That's what he's saying, right? Look at the eagle. It went and got a fish, and when it wants another, it'll go look for another one. And it was there. Okay? So we're supposed to learn from what we see there. What's in our eyes. And then he says, are you not more valuable than they? Jesus wants us to understand God is on your side. He cares about you. And if he's taking care of the birds, he's going to take care of you. And then he throws this in. And by the way, what good has anxiety ever done you? Right? You love those ulcers or all that stress. You love your hair falling out or turning gray prematurely, probably. Of course, now it's not prematurely, right? But maybe 10 years ago when it started to turn gray, it was. But stress is not good. And anxiety and being anxious about everything. And what has that ever gotten you? Right? And so Jesus is like, look, that's never done any good anyway. And you're only there because your eyeballs are here and not there. Take your eyeballs off the stuff that's causing you stress and put it over here where it belongs, on spiritual things, on God, on Jesus, on a good word, on the gospel. And so he goes further. And why are you anxious about clothing? And somebody pointed out, and it's not so much true in a service-based economy, but in a lot of economies, to talk about the finances, the money, the provisions, will really speak to the men. But then to talk about the beauty and the clothing is speaking to whom? The women, see? So I'm not saying it's true in every case. It's not true in a service-based economy as much. But it's still true, and you understand how that could be true, right? But it doesn't really matter, but he's covering all the bases here. Why are you worried about clothing? I can't even read that yellow there. Oh, yeah, I made that yellow. I thought I made it blue, but it's yellow. Consider. That word consider is basically the same. It's montano, and it comes from the same word as disciple, mathetes. Be a disciple in the way you look at what God's doing. Isn't that amazing? Look and be a disciple and learn about who God is and what He does, because you don't know it if you're all concerned and worried and anxious about what you're going to wear. That's what he's saying. They're not toiling and spinning. You don't see the flour trying to knit together its new flour for tomorrow, whatever. It's not toiling, it's not spinning, but yet look at how beautifully they are clothed. God did that, he says. And if God did that for them, how much for you? But so God clothes the grass of the field, which is alive, and today is alive, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven. Will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? He cares about the birds and the fish. He cares about you more. Well, I guess he didn't care about that fish. He cares about the birds and the two birds, and he cares about the flowers. I know it's all a matter of perspective, right? But he cares about you. He cares about you more than he cares about the grass of the field. Now you have to believe that, though. You have to believe he cares about you. That's trust. Where do you put your eyes? You have to trust God. That's the challenge. Are you going to trust him and put your eyes on what he's doing to prove he cares? He cares about everything, and he cares about you more, is what he says. And so Jesus says, so don't be anxious saying, what are we going to eat? What are we going to drink? Or what are we going to wear? Don't do it. If you're not going to do it, it's going to take trust. And he says, for the Gentiles seek after these things. Now, when Jesus said it, he was speaking to a Jewish audience. A Jewish audience who were the covenant people of God. And when he says the Gentiles seek after that, he's meaning those who are not the covenant people of God. So everybody out there in the world, they're chasing after these kinds of things, but God knows you need them. Doesn't he? You got to believe he does. You have to trust that he does. And so what's your answer? What's Jesus' answer to being anxious about this stuff? He says, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And all these things will be added. Okay? Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. That means take your focus off of that physiological stuff. Take your focus off of the stuff that's going to be corrupted anyway, and put it first. It doesn't mean we don't think about that stuff. But first put your focus on who God is, who you are in his eyes, and everything he's done for you. Put your focus there first. And then what does that do to Maslow's chart? It sort of turns it over, doesn't it? And you know, the bottom line is people without regard for safety at all have destroyed themselves because they weren't actualized. I mean, it doesn't have to be the other way around, right? People with plenty of food and plenty of safety have killed themselves, right? Why? Because other things on the chart were missing. So it really isn't everything foundation physiological first and then grows up. It really can be turned over. And sometimes the most important things are down here in the self-actualization. But what Jesus is saying, and this is a weird picture, but I made it. Jesus is saying, let this be the lens through which you view your world. Let it begin with who you are in relation to God. Let it start there. And from there, find your esteem. He cares about you. And from there, build relationships. And he says, and the other stuff will take care of itself. You see? And so that's the challenge. The challenge I want you to have this week is, I want you to find places, find things you can see with your eyeballs, physical and even the mind's eye. Find things that remind you that God is faithful, that God loves you, that you can trust God. I don't know what the picture is. I put up some representations. And of course, the middle one, you have to identify with a bird. If you're identifying with a cricket or whatever that is, a grasshopper. If you're identifying with a grasshopper, that's not... Unless you believe that when that mother bird drops the grasshopper, it will bounce off the side of the nest and the grasshopper will be running away. So if you can go there, okay. But otherwise, you would be identifying with the bird here and saying, I can trust God. I don't know what it is in your eyeball, but the challenge is, and if you're going to accept the challenge, I want you to grab a card either off the wall there or grab a card from the credenza. But the challenge is, take that card if you're willing this week, and if you have a smartphone, I want you to take a picture of it. If you're willing this week, I'd like you to take a picture. Mari's going to put on our Facebook page, right? On our Facebook page, a place for everybody to put your pictures if you do that kind of stuff. And I'd love to see a full, a ton of pictures if Facebook is still around by the end of the week. I don't know if you know about that, but I'd love to see a ton of pictures of where we found ourselves saying, God, I see that I can trust you. Will you accept that challenge? I hope you will. And we'll have a new challenge every week as we have a new lesson. In a moment, we're gonna have a shepherd up here praying over your needs, and we'd like to invite you to use this time if you'd like. We're going to sing a song, and if you'd like to come up and share a need that you haven't shared already, you can do that. Some of you have already shared in these cards right here, and you can turn these into the center as we stand. We're going to sing. But if you have something you'd like to share personally, you can come on up here and talk to one of the elders here, or you can talk to me. And let us know how we can help you on this journey of trusting God. Okay, so we're going to stand and sing. And please turn in these cards to the center if you have them.